Boy disappears during baseball game. 15 years later, his father sees this in an antique shop. Asterisk, asterisk. The metallic crack of the bat echoed loud, clean, and perfect, cutting through the warm April afternoon air at Field Creek Park. Jack Bennett stood on the sideline, gripping the brim of his old cap tightly as he watched his son Michael sprint toward first base. His heart was racing. That rush of adrenaline only baseball had ever given him since his youth. "Come on, Michael, run. You got this, son. Son." Jack shouted proudly. Michael, 13 years old, shoulder-length blonde hair, and his unmistakable bright red helmet that he never forgot on game days, made it to first base just in time. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Jack let out a breath of relief. For a brief moment, he caught Michael's glowing smile as he raised his hand in triumph. "Great play, Michael," said his friend and the team's coach, Rick, giving Jack a friendly pat on the back. "It's in his blood, just like his dad." Jack nodded with satisfaction, eyes fixed on his son, feeling like everything was exactly as it should be. Michael radiated confidence, always brave, always shining. Jack never imagined that perfect afternoon would be the last time he saw that smile on his son's face. The game remained tight, full of fast, strategic plays from both teams. When Michael's turn came again, he gripped the bat with confidence and squared his stance. Jack watched intently, fingers crossed as if that might influence the outcome. The ball flew toward Michael, and he struck it with incredible power. But this time, it soared out of bounds, straight into the thick vegetation surrounding the field, leading into the dense, shadowy woods of Field Creek Park. Michael looked toward the lost ball, let out a quick, frustrated laugh, and without thinking much, ran toward the tree line to retrieve it. "Michael, wait, don't go too far," Jack called out, concern in his voice. But Michael had already vanished into the edge of the woods. A few minutes passed, but to Jack, it felt like forever. The game continued, but Michael didn't return. Jack's chest tightened as his worry grew. "Rick, Michael's taking too long." "I'm going to see what's going on," he said, visibly anxious. Rick nodded, slightly distracted by the ongoing game. Jack walked quickly toward the forest's edge, feeling the drop in temperature and the rising humidity as he approached the trees. The music and cheers from the field faded behind him, replaced by an eerie silence. "Michael, Michael, are you there?" Jack shouted, his voice swallowed by the trees. No response. A wave of anxiety began to wrap around him, squeezing his chest like an invisible hand. Jack moved cautiously through the underbrush, eyes scanning for any sign of Michael among the trees. Suddenly, he heard footsteps and turned to see Rick and several concerned parents approaching to help. "He's still not back?" Rick asked. His voice tense. Jack shook his head. "Nothing. He's not answering." "Something's wrong." More people joined in, all calling out Michael's name, combing the ground, searching for any trace of the young player. Tension hung thick in the air. The sun dipped lower, casting long, eerie shadows on the forest floor, which now felt colder, darker. Then a voice broke the tense silence. "Jack, over here. We found something." It was one of the other dads, near the edge of the woods. Jack ran over, heart pounding harder with each step. When he arrived, he saw what the man held in his hand, a small silver chain with a pendant shaped like a baseball glove. The one Michael never took off a gift Jack had given him himself. Jack felt the world collapse beneath him. "This isn't normal. Something bad happened here," he whispered, voice cracking. The police arrived quickly after a frantic call. Officers began the search immediately, shining flashlights over the damp, Dark forest floor, scanning for any clue of Michael. Jack stood frozen, clutching the little silver chain, watching helplessly as the hours passed without answers. For hours, officers, neighbors, parents, and volunteers searched every corner of the park, the woods, the field. But there was no sign of Michael. Nothing. Nothing but that silver chain. As if the earth had swallowed him whole. As night deepened, Jack overheard fragments of the officers' conversations. No clear leads. Doesn't look like a prank. Just the chain. It's strange. It might have been intentional. Each word was like an icy blade sinking deeper into Jack's chest. The unanswered questions tore at him, leaving him powerless, drowning in fear and desperation. Eventually, a detective slowly approached. Jack vaguely recognized him, an older man with a kind but tired face. Named Detective Wilson. Mr. Bennett, we're doing everything we can. But tonight, it'll be hard to continue the search in this darkness. First thing in the morning, we'll return with tracking dogs and more help. What do you think happened, Detective? Jack asked, his voice trembling with anxiety. The detective was silent for a moment before replying. We're not sure yet, but we'll find out. I promise. The words sounded hopeful, but Jack felt the uncertainty behind them. As everyone slowly began to leave, Jack remained standing at the edge of the forest, eyes locked on the dark, ominous tree line. Suddenly, his flashlight slipped from his hand and hit the ground, casting light on something he hadn't noticed before. A chill ran down his spine as he moved closer. On the ground, near where Michael's chain had been found, he saw a trail of deep footprints. The prints were large, clearly defined in the wet earth, and showed signs of a struggle. His breath caught. Jack knelt down slowly to examine them, his pulse pounding, a tight fear seizing his throat. There was no longer any doubt in his mind. This was no accident. Someone had taken his son. Jack's heart now raced with sheer panic as he stared at the tracks disappearing into the dark woods. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless. To protect the one thing he loved most, he remained kneeling there, eyes fixed on the ground, as silent tears streamed down his face. That night, Jack understood that his life had changed forever, and there, staring into the dark forest, still holding too many secrets, he made a silent vow. He would never stop searching for Michael, no matter how long it took. The deep footprints before him were just the beginning of the mystery he was about to face. The days that followed that fateful baseball game were like an endless chain of shadows and unbearable silences for Jack Bennett. He sat in the living room, staring into the void, surrounded by memories that had become sharp blades of nostalgia. The ticking of the wall clock had turned into torture, marking every second since Michael had disappeared. Sleep no longer brought rest, only the cruel repetition of that moment at Field Creek Park. The ball flying out of the field, Michael running. After it, his bright smile vanishing between the trees. Jack relived those seconds over and over, asking himself what might have changed if he had just called out to Michael a few seconds earlier. Would his son have stopped running into the forest that now symbolized all his anguish? Again and again, he blamed himself in silence, sinking into thoughts that led nowhere but pain. "Where are you, Michael?" he whispered softly, almost pleading, as if his words could cross space and time and bring his son back. The police came to see him daily, showing maps, reports, and dead-end leads that crumbled before they took shape. That day, Detective Wilson returned to his door, looking tired and concerned, carrying papers that offered little hope. "Jack, I'm sorry. I don't have any good news," Wilson said gravely, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "We still haven't found anything." Solid. Just unreliable statements and conflicting rumors. Jack closed his eyes, and took a deep breath, trying to hold back the growing desperation in his chest. "Detective, there has to be more. A kid doesn't just vanish into thin air," Jack said, his voice hoarse. Wilson nodded silently. "We're exploring every possibility. Maybe Michael wandered farther than expected and someone caught him off guard. We're also considering the possibility that it was someone he knew. Have you noticed anything strange in recent weeks?" Jack shook his head, confused. "I don't know. Michael was happy, social. Everyone adored him. No one would hurt him," he answered, though a flicker of doubt shone in his eyes. On lonely nights, Jack started reliving ordinary moments with Michael, little fragments that had become precious. Breakfasts in the kitchen, silly baseball conversations, laughter on the couch watching games together. But alongside those warm memories, a slow-growing uncertainty crept in, the inevitable suspicion that someone close might have betrayed that innocence. One of those endless nights brought back a clear memory from a few weeks before the incident. Michael had come home from practice acting a bit off, quieter than usual. Jack had sat beside him, gently asking if something was wrong. Michael had replied, distracted, "It's nothing, Dad. Just something weird that happened today, but it's fine." Jack remembered the hesitation in his son's voice. What was that strange thing Michael hadn't told him about? That question gripped him, gnawing away in the silence. The next day, Jack decided to visit Rick, the coach of the youth team. He found him training other kids at the same field where Michael had disappeared. "Rick, I need to talk to you," Jack said firmly, trying to hide the unease in his voice. Rick approached, concerned. "Of course, Jack. Any news about Michael?" Jack shook his head slowly, staring at him. "I want to know if you noticed anything odd about Michael lately. Something he didn't tell me. He seemed distant days before he disappeared." Rick frowned, thinking back. Well, there was something weird between Michael and another kid a few weeks ago. Just a silly argument, I thought. Nothing serious. Who was the other kid? Jack asked quickly, a chill crawling up his spine. "A classmate named Evan. They weren't close. But lately, he'd been hanging around more," Rick said, shrugging. "I thought it was nothing, Jack." Jack nodded slowly, a dark feeling growing behind every loose thread. He left quickly, unable to shake the image of Michael's anxious face. A few days later, the police invited him to the evidence room. Jack found himself once again face to face with that silver chain, everything missing in his life tied to that single object. His hand trembled as he picked it up, a crushing weight settling in his chest. He couldn't hold back the tears while holding something so small, yet so painfully heavy. As he left the facility, still emotionally shaken, he noticed a man who seemed to have discreetly followed him. Turning around, the stranger greeted him politely. "Mr. Bennett, I'm sorry to approach you like this. My name is David Harris. I'm a private investigator. I'd like to speak with you about your son." Jack looked at him, startled. "What do you know about my son?" Harris glanced around carefully before answering. "Your son isn't the only boy who's gone missing around here, Mr. Bennett. I've been investigating similar cases near Field Creek Park. There's a disturbing pattern in Charlotte 1. The police haven't acknowledged publicly." Jack felt his heart drop. New fears flooded his mind. "What do you mean by disturbing pattern?" Jack asked, barely above a whisper, unable to hide the tremble in his voice. "In the last few months, 3 other boys have disappeared under similar circumstances, all near the stadium or surrounding areas. The police are investigating quietly, but no one has officially connected the cases. I believe your son is part of something larger." Jack felt the blood drain from his face. Everything grew darker and more complicated with each word. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Why are you telling me this now, Mr. Harris?" The investigator looked him straight in the eye, deadly serious. "Because I believe someone is hiding something in Charlotte, something darker than anyone realizes. Your son didn't vanish by accident, Mr. Bennett. Someone took him, and it's my job to find out who." Jack stood still, frozen by that revelation, his mind racing. Michael's disappearance was no longer just a personal tragedy. It was part of something much deeper, something sinister hiding beneath the calm surface of the city. As Harris handed him a business card, Jack took it with a trembling hand, feeling as if he had just stepped into the unknown. The fear was real, but so was his determination to find his son. What's really going on in Charlotte? Jack wondered as the investigator walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers, and with that, a chilling and bitter certainty began to take root inside him. The truth about Michael's whereabouts might be far more terrifying than he had ever imagined. 15 years after the day his life changed forever, Jack Bennett walked through the historic district of Charlotte. At 57, he was no longer the energetic and optimistic man he once had been. Time had marked him deeply, not just in the gray and silver beard he now wore or the deep lines around his tired eyes, but especially in the hollow look in his gaze, lost in constant, invisible pain. The memory of Michael never left him. Every corner of the city reminded him of his son. The case had never been solved, and Jack lived in isolation, obsessed with every clue, every tiny detail. Since that day, he had devoted every free moment to finding answers no one else could provide. The pain had become a kind of fuel, propelling his endless search. As he wandered slowly through the old neighborhood, lost in his thoughts, a small shop unexpectedly caught his attention: Hart's Antique Emporium. The window display featured carefully curated vintage items, pocket watches, faded photographs, worn-out trophies. But one thing froze his heart instantly. It couldn't be. His hands began to tremble. There, in the center of the display, perfectly lit, was the unmistakable red baseball helmet Michael used to wear at every game. For a moment, Jack thought he was dreaming, trapped in some cruel nightmare. "It can't be," he whispered, voice shaking as he stepped closer to the glass. Without thinking, he rushed into the store. A bell rang softly, announcing his entrance. Within seconds, Emily Harris appeared from behind the counter, a woman in her early 40s, with a kind face and loosely tied auburn hair. "How can I help you?" she asked gently. Jack, still shaken, pointed toward the display with trembling hands. "That red helmet, where did you get it?" he asked, barely containing his desperation. Emily studied the man carefully, noticing the intense emotion in his face. "It was part of a lot I bought at a private auction a couple of weeks ago," she replied cautiously. "Is it familiar to you?" Jack nodded slowly, unable to take his eyes off the helmet. "It belonged to my son Michael. He disappeared 15 years ago. Do you remember anything else about that auction?" Emily, startled and moved by the revelation, invited him to sit. "It was a private auction, but I know many of the items came from an old storage unit near Field Creek Park. It was a bit strange, very little information was shared. The organizers seemed eager to get rid of everything quickly." Jack felt a fire reignite inside him. Finally, he had a lead, a tangible trail. He looked at Emily with pleading eyes. "Please, I need your help." Every detail could matter. Emily nodded, gently, recognizing the desperation behind his gaze. "I have a photographic memory. I can recall exactly what I saw and who I saw there. I'll help you however I can." In the days that followed, Jack visited the shop often, working with Emily to reconstruct every detail of the auction. She described objects, faces, conversations. Together, They tried to piece together how Michael's helmet ended up there. One evening, while going over old maps and photographs spread across the shop's table, Emily recalled something important. There was a strange conversation I overheard at the auction. Someone mentioned an abandoned underground shelter near Field Creek Park. Do you know anything about it? Jack felt a chill down his spine. He immediately remembered those dark days when he had been desperately searching for his son. Someone had vaguely mentioned that shelter, but the police never looked into it seriously. A new surge of urgency washed over him. I have to go there. Tonight. Emily looked at him with concern. Jack, it's dangerous. We should call the police. I've waited too long. I need to do this myself. Please, just show me where it is. Emily took a deep breath before handing him an old map with the shelter's location marked precisely. Hours later, armed only with a flashlight and sheer determination, Jack arrived at the edge of Old Field Creek Park. The place looked abandoned, swallowed by time. He moved through dry trees and bushes until he found the entrance, partially covered by overgrowth. His heart pounded as he forced open the rusty metal door. The air inside was thick, cold, and damp. The silence was broken only by the echo of his footsteps. Cautiously, he moved through the dark, narrow tunnels, shining his light along the way. Soon, the beam revealed walls, scratched with dates and names, barely legible. Deeper inside, he found personal belongings, worn backpacks, old clothing, broken toys. Each discovery felt like a punch to the chest, clear evidence that others had been there. Trapped under dark and unknown circumstances, nausea overtook him as he realized the place held more than forgotten objects. Something terrible had happened there, something many had chosen to forget or ignore. Eventually, after navigating the damp corridors for several minutes, he reached a small, partially hidden room at the back. His light slowly swept across the space, illuminating a corner where an object rested that he recognized immediately. His breath caught. It was a small baseball glove, worn down by time. Jack knelt and picked it up carefully, tears welling in his eyes. He knew without a doubt it had belonged to Michael. As he held the glove tightly, his light revealed something else on the wall behind him. An old, yellowed photograph, tacked clumsily with a rusted pin. Jack approached slowly, heart pounding harder. He took it with trembling hands and focused his flashlight. The photo, damaged by time and moisture, clearly showed Michael as a child, wearing a sad smile. Beside him, with a hand resting on his shoulder, was an adult figure whose face had been deliberately scratched out and blurred by water damage. A cold shiver ran through Jack's entire body. The image was disturbing and clear. Someone had desperately tried to hide their identity. His mind exploded with painful questions, doubts, and fears. Who was that person? What had really happened in that hellish place? Staring at the photo in anguish, Jack understood bitterly that his search was only just beginning, and the fragments of the past he was collecting were pieces of a dark and terrifying puzzle. That photograph wasn't just a clue, it was undeniable. Proof that his son had been there, in the hands of someone whose identity remained a chilling mystery. Jack Bennett stared at the old photograph over and over again, seated in the farthest corner of Emily's shop. His hands trembled slightly as he studied every detail. Michael was clearly visible in the image, but the adult figure beside him remained a complete mystery. Who was that man standing next to his son? The uncertainty was eating him alive. Emily approached with 2 cups of hot coffee, gently breaking the silence that surrounded them. Have you remembered anything else? She asked softly. Jack let out a deep sigh, shaking his head in frustration. Nothing concrete yet. This man, he could be anyone. Maybe a coach, An acquaintance? I don't know. I feel like I'm going in circles. Emily sat down across from him, studying his face. Her photographic memory had been crucial so far, but even she couldn't identify the man in the picture. We should start talking to people around the neighborhood, Emily suggested gently. Folks who worked at the stadium back then. Someone must remember something. Jack nodded slowly, knowing it was their only chance. Over the next several days, they walked the streets of Charlotte together, looking for answers among former Field Creek Park employees, neighbors, and parents whose children had played baseball with Michael 15 years ago. Every conversation was difficult, full of awkward silences and painful memories. Many people preferred not to talk, averting their eyes from Jack's desperation. But every so often, a small clue would emerge, reigniting hope. One afternoon, while speaking with Mary Collins, a former stadium cashier, something made Jack's stomach tighten. I remember some of the boys talking about strange things around that time, Mary said hesitantly. They mentioned a man who was always hanging around the park, but no one took it seriously. We thought it was just teenage imagination. Jack frowned, trying to remain calm. Do you remember anything else? A name? Mary slowly shook her head. I'm so sorry, Mr. Bennett. I wish I could help more. Jack thanked her and left with Emily, deeply frustrated. A mysterious man. And still no name, Jack muttered through clenched teeth. Emily looked at him with sympathy, trying to calm his growing anger. We have to keep going. Someone out there knows something. Days passed, and the investigation became increasingly obsessive. Jack barely slept at night, poring over notes and maps compulsively, looking for connections that might not even exist. One particularly stormy night, Emily was at the shop organizing their investigation documents when she noticed a strange vehicle parked outside. From the window, she watched uneasily as a shadow remained motionless inside, discreetly watching the store. A shiver ran down her spine. She felt real, unknown danger. Jack, someone's watching the shop, Emily whispered on the phone, her voice trembling. Are you sure? Jack asked, alarmed. Absolutely. Something's not right. I'm on my way. Jack arrived minutes later, but the car was already gone. Still, both of them felt someone was trying to scare them to stop their search. But instead of backing down, it only fueled their determination to find the truth. The next day, Jack returned to the underground shelter, this time with Emily. Cautiously, they explored deeper into the grim, decaying place. They found old documents, ledgers, and disturbing evidence, children's toys, discarded clothing, and blurred photos of unknown kids. With growing horror, they realized the truth. This shelter had been used for child trafficking. The weight of that discovery was nearly unbearable for Jack. To think that Michael may have been a victim of something so evil made his head spin with grief and rage. As they left the shelter, Jack was struck by a sudden memory. Sam Bennett, the former park janitor, maybe he held more solid answers. He remembered the man had been briefly interviewed by police years ago, but they never dug deeper into his account. Wasting no time, they found Sam living in a modest house on the outskirts of Charlotte. He was now an elderly man, frail in appearance, his eyes dull with age. When he saw Jack, he seemed to recognize him instantly. Mr. Bennett. I knew you'd come eventually, Sam said in a low voice. Sam, I need answers. What really happened? That night to my son? Jack asked firmly. Sam looked around nervously. Please, come inside. It's not safe to talk out here. Inside the small living room, Sam spoke slowly, eyes fixed on the floor, heavy with shame and fear. I saw what happened that night. Michael was intercepted by someone, an adult. I tried to do something, but I got scared. They threatened me to stay silent. I've carried this guilt for all these years." Jack clenched his fists, overwhelmed by a mix of fury and helplessness. "Who took him, Sam?" "I need to know who it was." Sam shook his head slowly, his eyes glassy. I couldn't see the face clearly. He wore a hood. "But I do know Michael was alive when they took him. I heard he was transferred somewhere out of Charlotte. But I never found out where." Jack felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Michael could still be alive, somewhere, waiting to be found. "Sam, please, anything else? I need something that can help me find my son." Sam shook his head again. "That's all." "I know. I'm truly sorry." Jack walked out of Sam's house slowly, his mind racing to put the pieces together. Emily walked beside him in silence, fully aware of the weight of the revelation. They had only walked a few steps when they heard a sharp, violent noise behind them. Turning around in horror, Jack saw Sam's body fly several feet through the air, struck by a dark vehicle speeding away from the scene. Jack rushed toward him in a panic, but it was too late. The old janitor lay still, his eyes wide open, staring blankly at nothing. "Sam!" Jack shouted, collapsing beside the body. The sense of danger became terrifyingly real. Someone was determined to stop the truth from coming out. They had just silenced the only person who might have had more answers. Emily, shaken and terrified, looked around desperately for help. Jack remained still for a few moments, realizing this wasn't just about finding Michael anymore. He was now caught in the middle of something far more dangerous. With Sam's lifeless body in front of him, Jack finally understood the true magnitude of what he was up against. There were people willing to kill to keep what happened 15 years ago buried. The janitor's death was a message loud and clear. Jack slowly looked up at Emily, his face set with a renewed, unshakable determination. "I can't back down now. I'm going to find Michael and the one responsible for all of this, no matter what it takes." That moment marked a point of no return. They both knew they were close to uncovering a truth so dark and dangerous that someone was doing everything possible to erase it. Jack realized that the past still held far too many secrets and that his own life was now in very real, immediate danger. The search for Michael was no longer just a personal mission. With Sam's death, it became clear the enemy was close, and they were willing to do anything to protect this secret that had haunted Charlotte for so many years. The sun cast a gentle glow over the streets of Atlanta, filtering through the leaves and creating warm reflections on the sidewalks. In a quiet cafe, a young man named Michael Turner stared absent-mindedly out the window, slowly stirring the coffee he had nearly forgotten to drink. He was an attractive 28-year-old with deep blue eyes and blonde hair that fell to his shoulders. Though he lived a peaceful and stable life, there was something undefinable that always seemed to be missing. Michael worked as a graphic designer at a small downtown agency. He lived in a modest but cozy apartment, decorated with illustrations. He had drawn himself abstract landscapes and shapes that seemed to hide something just beyond reach. But behind that appearance of normalcy was a constant sense of emptiness, of memories that refused to come fully into view. The television in the cafe was playing a baseball game. As he glanced at it, a strange shiver ran through his body. Almost instinctively, he brought a hand to his neck, searching for something he couldn't quite name, a deep, silent sense of loss. It always happened when he watched baseball. It was like standing in front of a locked door with no key. "Are you okay, Michael?" asked his coworker and friend, Emma, noticing the confusion on his face. "Yeah, just a weird feeling," he replied, forcing a smile. "I don't know. like I've forgotten something important. Emma watched him quietly, but didn't press further. Michael knew this wasn't the first time. He lived with it, constantly small cracks in a memory that refused to fully reveal itself. Meanwhile, in Charlotte, Jack Bennett held a folded anonymous letter in his hands. His pulse quickened, and his breathing grew heavy as he read the short message again and again. If you want to find Jake, look for him in Atlanta. He's living under a different name. Follow the lead at Piedmont Mall. Jack needed nothing more than that one sentence to make his decision. Hope, long buried under years of grief, burst forth suddenly bright and powerful. 2 days later, Jack walked anxiously through Piedmont Mall in Atlanta. He scanned every face, hoping for a miracle. That didn't come. Each person became a possibility, only to vanish the moment after. His desperation mounted, but he refused to stop. Then, in a sudden moment, he caught sight of a familiar figure from a distance. Long blonde hair, athletic posture. His heart pounded violently. He ran toward the spot, but by the time he got there, the person was gone. He had missed his chance by just a few seconds. Jake? He whispered into the air, tears brimming in his eyes. A wave of helplessness crashed over him. For hours, he continued his desperate search. Every time he felt close, something got in the way. It was as if fate itself was mocking him, but he wouldn't give up. The next morning, Jack returned early, convinced that Jake was here somewhere waiting without knowing. Finally, as he stepped into a cafe on the corner, he saw him clearly for the first time. Sitting by the window was his son, now a grown man. But with the same expression Jack would recognize anywhere. His legs trembled. He walked forward slowly, holding his breath. Michael, the man his son had become, looked up in confusion as the stranger approached. "Do I know you?" Michael asked, puzzled. Jack felt his heart explode in his chest. "Jake, it's me," he said, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "I'm your father." Michael blinked, startled, caught between confusion and disbelief. "I'm sorry. I think you've got the wrong person. My name is Michael." Jack fought back tears, refusing to accept the response. "I know it sounds crazy, but you disappeared 15 years ago. You were just a boy. Someone took you from me. I've been looking for you ever since. I know you're Jake." Michael took a small step back, his face clouded with confusion. "Look, I don't know you." "I'm really sorry." Jack felt crushed, but before giving up, he slowly pulled something from his backpack, something he had carried for years in anticipation of this moment. "Jake, do you recognize this?" he asked softly, holding out the old red baseball helmet his son had worn as a child. Michael looked at the helmet, and instantly, a chill ran down his spine. His body froze as he stared at the worn-out object. Something deep in his mind stirred. Pushing through barriers that had been carefully built long ago, suddenly, a sharp pain stabbed through his head, as if a torrent of broken images was forcing its way to the surface. He heard laughter, saw quick flashes of a baseball field, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, a familiar face smiling from afar. Then, a dark forest, a firm hand on his shoulder, the cold sensation of fear and abandonment. "What's happening?" "To me?" Michael whispered, holding his head, trembling. Jack stepped forward, reaching out a hand. "Jake, I'm your father. This was stolen from you. Someone erased your memories, but I never stopped looking. Please, let me help you." Michael met Jack's eyes, and something inside him cracked. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but instinctively, he knew this man was telling the truth. Tears rolled down his cheeks, though he couldn't say exactly why. He slowly reached out with a trembling hand and touched the red helmet. brushing it softly with his fingers. In that instant, a clear memory struck his mind, his father placing the helmet on his head before a game, smiling warmly, saying in a loving voice, "I'm proud of you, Jake." Emotion flooded Michael's face. He looked up at Jack, tears streaming freely. "Dad, what did they do to me?" he asked at last, voice broken and pleading. Jack embraced his son tightly for the first time in 15 years, feeling the years of pain and suffering slowly melt away, replaced by an unshakable resolve. He knew there were still many questions to answer. Someone had deliberately erased Michael's past, hidden his truth, tried to bury a terrible secret. But now, after so long, they were together again. Jack was determined to protect his son at all costs, to recover every piece of the life stolen from him, and to uncover who was behind it all. And as he held Jake close, Jack felt, for the first time in years, that there was a real chance for justice. He knew the journey wasn't over. But now he had his son by his side, and that was enough to keep going, no matter the dangers waiting ahead. Jake stood frozen in that embrace, feeling the life he had known slowly falling apart. The cafe around him seemed to vanish. The only thing that felt real now was the man holding him, a man who claimed to be his father. Jack pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes with boundless tenderness. "Jake, my son." "I finally found you," Jack whispered, tears still trailing down his weathered face. Jake was overwhelmed, a storm of emotions crashing inside him. This is too much," he said in a broken voice. "My whole life, I believed I was Daniel Cooper, and now you tell me I'm someone else." "You're not someone else, Jake. You're my son." "Someone stole you from me 15 years ago," Jack replied gently. "I know it's hard, but you have to trust me." Jake took a deep breath, trying to still the trembling in his hands. The fragmented images that had begun to surface were still hammering at him without mercy. "Why don't I remember anything?" "Who did this to me?" Jake asked, desperate for answers. Jack lowered his gaze, the pain clear on his face. "I don't know yet, son. But we're going to find out together." Back in Charlotte, Emily was overwhelmed with emotion when she heard the news. Soon, the three of them were gathered at the small antique shop, now their makeshift refuge. Jake, still unsure and emotionally raw, leaned instinctively on Jack, seeking comfort. "What now?" Emily asked gently. Jack lifted his eyes, filled with determination. "Now we find out who did this. Someone erased Jake's memory. Someone powerful and close, someone willing to kill to keep their crimes hidden." Emily exchanged a worried look with Jack. They both knew they were stepping into dangerous territory. For days, they combed through files, old documents, and photos of people from the past. Slowly, a clear pattern began to emerge. Many of those linked to the mystery had been involved with the youth baseball team. Former employees, other kids' parents, people from Jack's old social circle. Jake watched the photos silently, unease growing in his gut. Some of these faces, "I recognize them," Jake said hesitantly, "like distant echoes. Familiar, but without names or context." Jack gently squeezed his shoulder in support. One night, as they reviewed their notes in the shop, they suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of shattering glass in the back. Jack reacted immediately, shielding Jake and Emily with instinctive urgency. "We need to go now," Jack ordered firmly, ushering them toward the front door. As they stepped outside, they saw a dark vehicle parked just ahead, its headlights flicked on. A frantic chase through Charlotte's nighttime streets began. They ran through narrow alleys and deserted avenues, feeling the danger draw closer by the second. Jake, disoriented and scared, could feel his repressed memories fighting to surface under the pressure. Jack and Emily shielded him constantly, refusing to lose him again. Eventually, they reached a clearing near Mountain View Lookout. The night view from there was breathtaking, but in that moment, it only signaled danger. The mysterious car came to a halt a few feet away, and a figure stepped out slowly, cloaked in shadows. "Stay behind me," Jack said, moving resolutely toward the stranger. "Jack, you were always too persistent," came the cold, hateful voice of the man. Jack frowned, something about the voice tugging at a distant memory. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" The figure stepped forward, his face partially lit by the street lamp. Jack's breath left his lungs completely. "Richard," he whispered, stunned that it was Richard Dawson, the former coach who had once worked beside him, a man he had trusted completely, a man who had always taken a special interest in Jake. Richard gave a cold smile. "So you finally see it, Jack. For years you thought I was your friend, but I was always watching from the shadows. Why?" Jack shouted, his fury boiling over. "Why did you do this to my son?" Richard stepped closer, a mocking expression on his face. "Envy, Jack. You always had everything. The perfect family, the talent, the admiration. I had nothing. When the opportunity came, I made a choice. Jake was the key. Taking him from you was my greatest triumph." Jack lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. The two men fought furiously, years of pain and rage erupting in each blow. "You bastard. You stole my son's life," Jack roared, tears streaming down his face. Jake stood frozen, horrified, unable to move. His memories now came flooding back in violent waves, recognizing that face, reliving the fear of the night he was taken. Eventually, Richard broke free from Jack's grip and staggered to his feet. "You can't protect him forever, Jack." Richard spat, breathless. "This isn't over." With those words, he vanished into the darkness, leaving Jack shaking and exhausted. Emily and Jake ran to him, helping him up. Jake looked at his father, still trembling. "Dad, I remember everything now," Jake said in a broken voice. "He was there that night. He's the one who took me." Jack felt his heart shatter all over again. Richard Dawson had been by his side all this time, pretending to be a friend while secretly destroying his life. The truth was almost too painful to bear, but now the enemy had a face. Richard wouldn't stop. Jake was still in danger. The threat was more alive than ever. Jack knew he would have to protect his son no matter what. The face of the enemy was no longer a mystery. But that didn't make things easier. In fact, it made the fight ahead even more brutal, more dangerous, more desperate. Jack pulled Jake into a tight embrace as Emily stood silently beside them. The night was far from over, and they now understood that the known enemy was more dangerous than any shadow. The truth had finally emerged, but with it came the chilling certainty. That time was running out. Richard Dawson was still out there, hiding among them. And Jake was still in danger. The real battle for their lives had only just begun. The wind blew fiercely across Mountain View Lookout, making the dry leaves swirl around Jack Bennett as he stood firm, face to face with the man who had destroyed his life. Richard Dawson stared back with a cold expression, full of hate and defiance. The silence between them felt heavy and volatile, like every word could detonate a storm. "Why did you do this, Richard?" Jack asked, his voice steady but seething. "I trusted you. I thought you were my friend." Richard let out a bitter laugh and stepped forward. "Friend? You were always too naive, Jack. You think I ever truly cared about you. Since we were young, you were the golden boy, the talented one, the admired one. And me? always in your shadow. Always invisible. Jack shook his head in disbelief. So, you kidnapped Jake out of envy? It wasn't just envy, Richard said with contempt. It was justice. You took everything from me. The opportunities, the recognition. My life fell apart because of you. Taking Jake was the only way I could make you suffer like I did. Rage surged up through Jack like a tidal wave. He took a deep breath, trying to keep it under control. Justice? You think stealing my son was justice? You have no idea what hell I've lived through for the last 15 years. Richard smiled maliciously. Oh, I know, Jack. I watched every minute of your suffering. Watching you fall apart, it was a pleasure. Jack couldn't hold back any longer. He lunged at Richard with fury, knocking him to the ground. They struggled violently, fists flying, pushing, grappling, all the years of pain erupting in pure chaos under the night sky. It ends here, Jack shouted, shoving Richard hard toward the edge of the lookout. Richard staggered dangerously close to the cliff, the drop just inches behind him. For the first time, fear showed in his eyes. Jack, stop. A voice rang out from behind them. Jake and Emily had arrived, skidding to a halt in front of the scene. Jake stared at Richard with eyes full of pain and fury. Let him go, Dad, Jake said, stepping forward slowly. He's not worth it. He can't hurt us anymore. Jack looked at his son, breathing heavily. He hesitated for a few seconds before finally releasing Richard, letting him drop to the ground. Richard slowly rose, smirking. This isn't over, he muttered threateningly. But just then, the flashing blue lights of police cruisers lit up the lookout, sirens wailing through the night. Officers surrounded them quickly. Richard Dawson, you're under arrest, called out Detective Wilson, stepping forward with his weapon drawn. Do not resist. Richard raised his hands slowly, hatred in his eyes, as officers handcuffed him and led him toward the waiting vehicles. Jack felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but also a deep sadness for all that had been lost, all the years that could never be recovered. Jake walked over and embraced his father tightly. They stayed like that for several long minutes, silent, holding on to a moment they had waited far too long to share. The weeks that followed were difficult, but healing. Jake slowly began to recover memories of his childhood, guided by Jack and Emily, whose presence had become essential to their lives. Therapy revealed the psychological scars he carried, but little by little, Jake started feeling like himself again. Jack and Jake spent long afternoons together at the old family home, rebuilding their relationship one memory at a time. Jake found comfort in hearing stories of his early years, slowly reclaiming the identity that had been stolen from him. And Emily, with her kindness and unwavering support, became a vital part of their new beginning. One sunny Sunday, months later, Jack, Jake, and Emily returned to Field Creek Park. It was game day for the Youth League, just like that fateful afternoon 15 years earlier. From the stands, Jack watched in silence as Jake held the old red helmet in his hands, the same one that had once symbolized his stolen past, but now, redemption. Looks like everything's come full circle, Jake said with a soft smile, gently touching the helmet. Jack looked at him, moved, and nodded. Yes, but this time, we're together. Emily smiled, her eyes glassy with emotion, watching the family she had helped reunite finally find peace. As they watched the game, Jack reflected on everything they had endured, the loss, the pain, the endless search, but also the strength, the courage, and the bond that had carried them through it all. He understood now that his journey had been long and bitter, but they had overcome the hardest battle together. On the field, the kids ran with joy, laughing and playing, unaware of the deep wounds that Jack and Jake had fought so hard to heal. But for them, that game was more than just a game. It was the closing chapter of a long nightmare, the final triumph over a darkness that had once consumed them. Jack gently took Jake's hand, smiling warmly as they shared the moment. Jake, his eyes glistening, finally felt ready to fully embrace who he was, free of the shadows that had held him for so long. In the stands, Jack watched his grown son with boundless pride. The red helmet, once a symbol of pain, now gleamed in the sunlight with a new meaning: resilience, survival, and the power to heal. The final play of the game sent the crowd into a wave of cheers and applause. Jack and Jake exchanged a deep, quiet smile, full of peace and hope. The game was over, but for them, it was a new beginning, a chance to be truly happy again. As they walked out of the stadium, Jack felt a deep calm settle over him. The past had finally found its resolution. Beside him walked Jake Strong and Shure and Emily, now inseparable from their lives. The suffering had ended. Before them lay a future wide open with possibility. Looking out over the Charlotte skyline bathed in golden sunlight, Jack understood one final truth. This had been the last play, and after so many years of waiting, he had finally won.